Firstly, we're finding that discounting correlates with depressive symptoms. This is in line with previous work, which implies at least that being depressed increases your choice of immediate reward. The different reasons why that might be, previous accounts have tended to focus on the fact that when people are depressed, their sort of time horizon tends to shorten. So, for example, become a bit more pessimistic about the future. So people might feel that the delayed reward is never going to happen or won't materialize. It may also be other explanations. It may be an attempt for people to kind of boost their mood by having some immediate reward. Either way, the evidence, our study, I guess, is in line with previous evidence that the more depressed you are, the bigger this effect in making you more impulsive. The bit about relapse prediction is a bit nuanced because residual symptoms predict relapse as a whole, irrespective of medication. But when you're looking specifically at medication, the effect of stopping medication, residual symptoms don't predict whether stopping medication makes you more likely to relapse. So it's a bit subtle, but in that way, the fact that discounting doesn't predict relapse is in line with the fact that symptoms don't predict relapse particularly well as a function of medication. The effect that we saw after discontinuation on symptoms was quite small. So people's depressive symptoms did worsen slightly when they stopped medication. But these are people that already have quite low levels of symptoms and they got just a tiny bit worse. It's probably probable that discounting is probably just not sensitive enough to pick up that small change in symptoms. I guess our findings are in line with previous findings, which link serotonergic function to the ability to wait for a reward. And we're also kind of strengthening the link that's already there in the literature between depression and impulsivity. I guess in this case, we couldn't make any kind of prospective forward predictions about illness trajectory. That's, I suppose, left now to future work to kind of try and explore a bit more why there are these links between depression and impulsivity and how that might be varying on chronicity and relapse and so on. Interesting question. So our study was part of a wider study looking at behavioral markers of relapse after discontinuation. At least one of the other studies did find some behavioral predictors of relapse, specifically how long people took to make decisions about whether to exert effort. I think in general, though, depressive relapse is quite a complex phenomenon. It's something that, there's an interaction between somebody's state of mind, what's happening in their brain, and what's happening in the world. So it's a complex dynamic phenomenon. So I think our finding sort of strikes a bit of a note of caution as to whether these one-off snapshot sort of behavioral measures are going to be capable of predicting complex things like relapse. And, maybe what we need is something that's a bit more dynamic. We can answer that. Yes, yeah, we didn't expect that. We tested this to see, because we expected the opposite, we thought that higher discounting at baseline might be associated with worsening of depression. The fact that we found the opposite strikes a bit of a note of caution. It could be a false positive. Occasionally, of course, you find false positive results that don't subsequently replicate. It's possible that there's another reason for it, and it comes down to the reasons why discounting might be increased in depression. So on the one hand, it might be a problem, if you like, that that discounting is higher. Maybe that people are not willing to delay gratification, and that's actually part of something that maintains depression. We know, for example, that avoidance is a big part of depression. On the other hand, it could be that becoming a bit more impulsive when you're depressed is actually adaptive. And it means that you kind of get a bit more immediate reward that boosts your mood a bit and carries you through. The jury's out on those, and we need further study to kind of pick apart which goes in. When you're doing science and statistics, you have to distinguish between something that's statistically significant and clinically significant. So sometimes if you have a large study, for example, you can detect a statistically significant effect. I mean, the effect's probably there, but it might still be fairly small. In some cases, too small to be clinically significant. In our case, yeah, we're talking about fairly small effects. And of course, we didn't find any predictive power of discounting or relapse. The bottom line is probably discounting is not going to be used like a lab test. But I think, for clinicians, having a conversation with your patients about how depression might be associated with this kind of shift in focus to the present and difficulty in making future plans, I think that can be clinically useful. As I said, we know avoidance is a big part of what maintains depression, and through that, people miss out on opportunities for longer term rewards.